This video is going to go through how to use the direct submission option in CoralCT. So from the CoralCT homepage, we'll go to submit or edit data. And then this last option here, direct submission. So this will enable you to just immediately submit files that will go straight onto the server and then can be used right away. Whereas the other options here are buttons where you would submit data files to us, and then at some time in the next few days, we would handle those submissions and then make them available. So the direct submission is faster and a better way to go as long as you can meet the requirements and stay organized. Okay, so please do read about this in the user guide. You do have to click this button to proceed. There are really specific requirements for the direct submission, so things do just need to be done precisely. This video should give you a good sense of how to do that, and the user guide should reinforce the exact details that you'll need. Okay, so this is the screen where we're going to select basically two files and submit them. So we need to select the imagery data, which could be the CT scan or an X-ray file. And we'll need to submit a completed metadata template file. And then once we do both of those, we'll be able to hit submit. There's also the option here to make a map. So that's optional, so will display on the home screen, like when you select different regions or subregions. If you don't make a map, you can still work with those data. So I won't go through this right in this video, but that's another option once you get your data submitted. Okay, so we'll start with the metadata template. So before I click this button, I'll show you how that should be set up. So you can download that template from the website, or there are a few places in CoralCT where you can click a button to download it. And this is what it will look like. So for the normal submission procedures, not the direct one, this is pretty flexible, but for the direct submission, this does need to be set up in an exact way. So there's some notes here to indicate that, and in the user guide, and I'll go through an example here in this video. Okay, so we have just these three rows here that are some example inputs that we have. So I will, for now, I'm just going to actually delete these and then add in a new one, like as if we're doing a direct submission. Okay, so the name is the name of the core. So that can be almost anything. It can't actually be the same, though, as any cores are currently in CoralCT, so that's a warning message that might pop up. You can also look in the core directory from the CoralCT homepage if you want to see the existing core names. But you could just add some sort of character on there to make it a unique name if needed. So I'll just call this new core example. Okay, piece, that's if you have scanned one single core but in multiple CT scan files. Okay, so if you've scanned the whole core in one CT scan and it's all in one file, then you don't need to put anything here. The piece would be if you have separate scans for different pieces of the core. So you might call that like top or bottom or mid, whatever is relevant. One caveat here is that this can't just be a number. So it could not just be one or two, but it could be A, B, C, or if you want them labeled with numbers, you could call it like piece one, piece two, or something like that. It just can't be only a number. For now, just in this example, I'll delete that, leave it blank. So region is like a large geographic area. So that could be on the scale of Hawaii, or there you'll see the options on this CoralCT home screen or in the directory to see if there's any existing regions that are applicable. Otherwise, you can create a new one here. Same as subregion. Maybe there is a subregion that already fits where you're submitting cores from, or maybe you're making a new one. Okay. Genus, that's the genus of coral. All right, so the owner is the CoralCT username of who owns these data or who is associated with them. So it has to be exactly case matched to a CoralCT username. So this is my username. Right? Your username might not be your normal name. It could be whatever you made your CoralCT username. It just needs to match exactly here. You can have multiple owners. And so to do that, you put 2 slashes and then the other user's name. So we have example user, if that was another username that you wanted. to be able to work on this core, or to be able to work on this core if it's restricted access. So I'll just leave it like that for now. Notes, anything particularly relevant about the core that you want to have attached to the data, so that will always show up in the output files. You don't necessarily need anything there. I'll leave that blank for now. It might be things like whether the banding is really nice or confusing, or any notes about where it was collected, anything that might be unusual. Right, citation, that should just be a DOI link, so I can leave that blank for now, but if you had a valid DOI link to put in there. And so the citation would be generally for something that's already published. We can update this later if needed, if these are pre-publication data that are later published. There's also a place for acknowledgements, so that might be if you want to ensure that if these data are used, that in the acknowledgement section of the paper that someone else is properly attributing that. So please you can also leave this blank. Okay, hard drive, that just by default is 1. Flip is a toggle for whether the scan or the orientation of the scan as it goes into Coral CT is upside down or right side up. There's some explanation of that in the user guide. You can also, to some extent, do trial and error and get a sense of how, if you're doing multiple scans, what orientation your course went in the scanner leads to the need to be flipped or not. So that's just a 1 to flip it and a 0 if not. Okay, latitude and longitude of where they are collected. So as precise as possible, so ideally more precise than I'm putting in this example. And use negatives for west and south hemispheres. Okay, depth in meters, month of collection, year of collection. Right, the file size, the one I'm going to submit as an example, is quite small. I think it's going to be something like 7 megabytes. Often these will be hundreds of megabytes or even into the gigabytes, in which case it could be over 1,000. So this is just indicative, so it doesn't need to be exact with multiple decimal places. All right, so this unlocked column is setting the public accessibility of these data. Again, see more about this in the instructions here in the user guide. I'm going to make this fully publicly accessible, which is 1. Okay, the DIN slope and intercept are for CT scans. So there are default ones that you would see in the template, which I believe is that. So you could use those if you don't have any idea. There are also instructions and other recordings about density calibrations. Right, toggle for whether it's a CT scan being 1 or 0 would be an X-ray, so I'll put 1. And if it's a CT scan, then you don't, well, there's not any meaning of these last 2 columns, but it's best to just put a placeholder. We use -99. So these would be for X-ray. So if you were submitting X-ray data and be submitting a TIFF, then you would make the CT column 0. And then the X-ray positive is whether this is a positive, an X-ray positive or an X-ray negative. And then DPI would be the digital pixels per inch that you should know for the image that you're submitting. Okay, so that's all the information that's needed. And for direct submission, then we actually need to delete all of these rows. So it needs to be just like this, where we have the row 1 is the column headers as provided, and then the information you have added is column 2. Okay. I will just hit save on that. So that is all set to go. So I can go back to Coral CT, select completed metadata template file. Okay, sometimes if it gets a little stuck like that, we can just hit cancel and we can just go back and do this again. Sometimes, at least on Mac, it just doesn't let you choose an option right away. But now that's working. Okay, so this is our metadata template file that we just filled out. Okay, and then now I have to select CT scan or X-ray. So I'll talk a little bit about what that will look like. Okay, so I have some example data here in NuCore. They're .dcm or DICOM files. So this is a small example. There's like 200 or so files. You might have many more, which is fine. So there's a few ways that we can organize these for submission. Okay, so one would be if you have this folder or a folder that then contains directly within it all the DICOMs for that scan, we can just compress this folder. So I can do compress. All right, that makes a zipped file. And I just need to rename it to dicoms.zip. Okay, and we could submit this. So to check, if we just want to verify before you're choosing it, you could open this. And it's a folder that contains all the DICOMs. Okay. So that would be one option. You could also go into this folder and select all of the DICOM files and compress that. And again, just rename it dicoms.zip. Right? And again, this is what you would submit. And again, if we want to check, you can just unzip that. And in here are all the DICOMs. So that works. This folder here could contain multiple subfolders. So some CT scans put the DICOM files from one scan into different subfolders, often for different spirals of the scan. So just as an example, if your data are coming off of your scanner, something like this, where some arrangement of subfolders and some of the data are in one subfolder and some are in another. This is also fine, then we could just select both of these and zip these. Okay, so then just to verify what that's going to look like. So then before I submit it, let's just check to make sure it's going to meet the requirements. So that unzips as a folder, and within that folder are either the DICOM files directly or there's subfolders that contain the DICOM files. So this will work as well. Okay, so those are just different options for how your data could be organized. So I will just use this last one that I left off with here. So going back to Coral CT, select CT scan, and I'll choose the dicoms.zip. Okay, so now we've chosen both the CT scan file, or if you were doing an X-ray, then you would have chosen something called xray.tif, and we chose a metadata template file, so now we can hit submit. Great, so that succeeded, and that scan will be ready to use on Coral CT.